welcome to the episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Neil Horowitz. Find me on Twitter, NJ287, also on LinkedIn, where I post more content. We'd love to connect you there. The website, you can find everything, dsmsports.net, and this podcast is available on whichever podcast platform is your favorite. We have an awesome show for you guys today. I really enjoyed having this guest on. I've known her for years, and just a tremendous conversation about what it means to activate in sports, with being a sponsor, working with women athletes. My guest on the podcast today is Sara Toussaint. She is the head of TMJ Catalyst and co-CEO of TMJ. You'll hear more about what TMJ is. They represent a ton of athletes in the space and work with brands to help monetize these athletes and monetize their brands. Just lots of good stuff here coming up with Sara. So here she is. Listen up to a great wide-ranging conversation with Sara Toussaint of TMJ and TMJ Catalyst. I am back on the podcast with today's guest. I'm so psyched to be chatting with her. I've appreciated having the relationship with Sara for years. And my guest on the podcast today is Sara Toussaint. She is the co-CEO of TMJ and head of TMJ Catalyst. And welcome to the podcast today, Sara.
Thank you. I am so honored. You've had some pretty cool guests on here for sure. And I just your energy definitely shows why you're a great podcaster because you can manage 100 plus podcasts and no big deal.
Oh, I appreciate that. It feels like just yesterday, 12 years later, here we are, and we're still having great conversations. And I'm so glad to be able to pick your brain and learn from you today. You're doing really cool stuff with TMJ. Before we get in the meat of our discussion, you've had a really cool career path and it has led you where you are today. So tell us about your background, how you got started, all your stops along the way, and certainly what you're doing today with TMJ and TMJ Catalyst.
Oh my God, I'm gonna try and be fast. I really stumbled my way into the sports space. Not something I thought I would ever do. I'm not an athlete. I stopped playing softball once I got to college, but I've been very lucky in my career. Started off at a law firm, thinking I was going to go to law school and work in government in some capacity.
At like
And
the sports law firm too. Like that's the one that I think of when I see like MLB commissioners or whatever coming from there.
yeah, you know what's crazy? It's like I didn't work on that many sports cases. However, we'd see Paul Tagliabue come through the office because he was a partner at our firm
Yeah.
before he became commissioner at the NFL. And RIP Paul Tagliabue, but the NFL had their lobbying office in their building, like the first floor of where the law firm started was there. And so it was around me, but I didn't like really delve too much into it. But I
Yeah.
will say this, after after probably 6 months of being at the law firm, I'm like, I'm not going to law school. This is not for me.
Yeah.
But it was a 2 year program where you're supposed to go get some legal experience and then go off to law school with a good recommendation. And I said, I don't want to do that. And I switched to the firm's marketing department. And it was through that experience, marketing PR, it was through that experience where I met this lawyer whose name was Andy Friedman. And he was actually a tax lawyer for MLB, the NFL, and then the NHL.
Wow.
And I just thought that was so fascinating. So he and I built a really good relationship because he oversaw all the marketing and PR efforts. Even though I didn't work with him on any cases around, tax law,
Yeah.
I had worked really well together. And when I said I had to move to New York for my husband's job, I said, I don't know anybody in New York. And he's like, well, let me see who's hiring. And so he reached out and MLB said, hey, we've got 3 positions that are open that she may be good fit for. And one was in the law department, one was in licensing, and one was in labor relations. And so I thought the labor relations opportunity was the most interesting one because it touched basically all aspects of the business, and it was everything from obviously like player issues, umpire issues, anything that affected those two constituents, right? Whether it was media or sponsorships or whatever it was. I thought that could be really interesting,
Yeah.
and so I did that. Pretty much knew my first day it was a mistake, but I stuck it out for a year and a half. In that time, got my MBA at night. I worked, and I met a classmate there who was working at Major League Soccer, and then I switched to Major League Soccer, and that really felt like home. So in at MLB, it was labor relations is usually a very negative space. Like the
Yeah.
players aren't happy, the umpires aren't happy. There's usually some labor law issues, and
Totally.
so my job was to track players who tested positive for prohibited substances, and so it was just not great. But MLS, Major League Soccer was great. It felt like home. It felt comfortable. The focus was totally different. It was on sponsorships and with the focus on the Hispanic market. And that's my background, even though I really never really had a professional like marketing training. I got my MBA, but what you do in school sometimes is much different than what the reality is.
Yeah.
And so, I wasn't really learning about sponsorship, getting my degree, but it felt right and it was exciting. It was a 2006 is when I started working there. It was a World Cup. I didn't know what offside was. I got to learn really more about the sport and just what I loved about it was just like the diversity of the people at MLS, just every like I feel like there's any culture, any background, any, religion, race, creed was there. And it felt like home. Like it felt like really cool.
Yeah.
And so did that for a couple years, had to leave that job because of I had gotten married. My husband was moving, followed him, worked at a startup lacrosse team in the middle of a recession in Boston. Really, tough to do, especially selling sponsorships. I was terrible
Yeah.
at it. Did that for a season, wasn't getting paid. My salary I think was $35,000.
Wow.
Versus like, and I graduated with an MBA and I'm making
Yeah.
$35,000, and I was like, I literally cannot afford to work here anymore. So I left sports altogether for 4 years and I
Yeah.
worked in higher education. I worked in venture capital, um, moved again, and it was going to a, a happy hour for my alumni club that I met somebody in Wells Fargo sponsorship group. And they said, "Hey, we just signed the Mexican national team and Major League Soccer sponsorship. Like, we're looking for somebody to manage this work." And I was like, "Yeah." And so I did that for 9 years. I worked at Major League Soccer, focused on sponsorship. Um, and it wasn't just soccer, it was college sports was a big piece of it as well.
Mhm.
So conveniently, I moved to Gainesville, not for that, but just worked out conveniently. I moved to Gainesville, worked on the Florida Gator sponsorship, North Carolina sponsorship, and a couple others. And then, gosh, while I was at Wells Fargo, working on Mexican national team projects, I came across TMJ and the people that worked at TMJ specifically on Twitter, which I think, Neil, that's how we met
Yeah.
first, wasn't it?
Totally.
Yeah. And so I saw the work they were doing around content creation and storytelling and access to talent. And that was my introduction to TMJ. And I hired them um, to help develop some content around Mexican soccer specifically. Uh, and I had seen the growth. I started working with them in 2017. And then by 2022, when I was ready to leave Wells Fargo, they had grown from, maybe 20 players to 150 players focused on women's
Wow.
soccer. And I was like, oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
At that point, once I left Wells Fargo, I was able to say, hey, I really am interested in what you're doing. Can I invest in your company? And so I became an investor in TMJ. At that point, they said, do you want to join us? And I was like, no, I don't want to mess this up. You guys are doing a great job. You don't need me. And I worked at another startup marketing agency. And then I did that for a couple years, working really mostly with um, doing some consulting work for Major League Soccer and Major League Baseball, but really spent my time in Spanish media with Televisa. So mostly
Yeah.
around like event marketing, event strategy. And then I feel like sometimes it's like a young person's game. I just felt like exhausted, and the TMJ folks said, "Hey, are you ready to join us now?" And I was like, "Yes." So now I am at TMJ,
Hell
where
yeah.
we are one of the first and largest talent representation agencies for women's soccer players in the world. And I joined as co-CEO to focus on the commercialization part of that. So I tried to do that in less than like 2 minutes, but I failed spectacularly.
No, the backgrounds help inform like what your thought processes are, what your perspective is, what your POV is, what your areas of expertise are, and what a time to be at TMJ. I'm sure where women's soccer is as big as ever. I mean, a great NWSL championship. We have the Olympics not too far away. We have who knows what's going to happen. We're not to date this podcast, but lots of interesting stuff happening now with the NWSLPA and Trinity Rodman and Sophia Wilson, of course, and just lots of fun stuff. And I'm sure it makes your job very fun and dynamic as well.
It's wild. The growth has been wild. The one thing I did skip was I did become in 2021, I became an investor in North Carolina Courage. And so
Yeah,
people
that's
have
right.
asked me since, is there a conflict of interest? And I was like, well, not for me in that I cannot hose one without I can't lean on one and benefit one side without harming the other, right? So I'm a very much like neutral party. So somebody asked me,
Yeah.
hey, what do you think about um, the salary cap? And I was like, I'm literally in the balanced position where I was like, I want the most for the players, but understanding like there needs to be, sustainability for the clubs and the league,
Right.
for these players to call home. So I want like, how do we optimize both sides, right?
Totally.
That's where I'm coming from. But that I was like, but if you want an agent's perspective, talk to Guillermo,
Yeah,
my
I'm not gonna
co-CEO.
put you on the spot and ask you to solve all the issues and problems and make sure we have a sustainable business and all that. That's for we'll do that in part two, Sarah.
Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good.
But I want to hear because I mean, you and I did first connect when you were at Wells Fargo, and I thought and at the time, like I was still very fascinated as these bigger companies that had a big footprint in sports sponsorships, and we're starting to build these really dedicated roles. Like we need someone to look after the sports sponsorship and to help us activate it and make sure we're getting the most out of it. So, like, I guess give me an idea of like what the remit of your role was like, and it sounds like just working with the Mexican national team, with some of the partnerships you had, like it was truly a partnership and not just an advertising agreement. Like you were helping to elevate the Mexican soccer team. You're helping to elevate these brands and do so in a way that would mutually benefit both sides. So like, what do those roles look like? And I guess in general too, like what are brands? What does success look like for the actual brand side as well?
Yeah. Oh my God. I could probably talk for like 2 hours about that. But I would say, being on the brand side, specifically around Wells Fargo and sponsorship, and I think for a lot of brands that aren't endemics, right? That aren't
Yeah.
apparel and your traditional
Right.
beer and drinks, like sponsorship is kind of like most marketers are like, what is sponsor? Like, what does that mean? Right. And it does turn to like a logo slap thing. But for us, especially because a lot of us on this Wells Fargo team had the property side, we knew there was, the reason why it is a partnership is because yes, the properties want their check, but they also want to increase the visibility of their own brands, right? So where I
Yeah.
came in was like twofold. I had, two agendas, especially being on the property side was well, on the Wells Fargo side, it was how do we support the marketing initiatives that the CMO had set in place, right?
Mhm.
And so we would use sponsorship as a way to augment the existing media plans and marketing strategies for in-store, for everything, from the website to in-store, et cetera. And then, from the brand side, what the property really wanted is Wells Fargo to promote, especially around Mexican national team and Major League Soccer, was promote those properties here in the US, right? And so to have the Mexican national team debit card on every Wells Fargo ATM was like a huge win. The same thing
Yeah.
for Major League Soccer cards, like huge, or soccer, whether it was sweepstakes or content, like to have them on our Wells Fargo channels where, we had significant followings on back in the day when you didn't have to do a pay for play, like these brands built their audience, right? And you had, if they followed you,
You
you were
actually
on their
reach them.
feed
Yeah.
and it was very apparent. But so we, to the you guys don't understand like what a win it was for me to get, our marketing, our sponsorship marketing efforts on an ATM channel, or if you walk into a bank and see it on a window cling or on the screens behind the tellers, like those are really like prime real estate on the
Yeah.
brand side. And so we were able to do that on a number, usually maybe once, maybe twice a year to be able to like really maximize the reach of our partnership with those soccer properties. And same thing, for the Gators or North Carolina, again, to
Yeah.
have, at least in those regions, like the Gator logo and the UNC marks. It was
And
good.
ultimately, that's like trying to draw the connection between if you are a Wells Fargo customer, that you in being a Wells Fargo customer, you are also supporting these brands and trying to make sure you draw the associations. Is that kind of like the dots that get connected there of
Oh
how
yes, I'm
each side
sorry.
can win?
Yes, absolutely. It very much is like, there's a lot of data out there of consumer affinity to brands that support their favorite teams. And we
Yeah.
definitely saw that in terms of the number of accounts that were open, and we could tie a Mexican national team card, a Florida Gator card to a new account. Like we could say that count, and that was the card that they requested, and we can presume that we had done marketing there that had caused that demand.
Yeah.
So that was definitely,
One more, like I want to
definitely.
piggyback on that real quick because but I do want to segue in a moment too. But because I'm gonna geek out here for a moment. When it comes to identifying those bottom line results of new accounts, of maybe it's like new more customers that are Hispanic or soccer fans or
Yeah.
whatever it be, or Gators fans, like is that the kind of stuff where it's like it's on the partner, it's on the property, it's on you guys at Wells Fargo at that point to identify those results and do you report it back to the club to MLS to
I
Major
tried to
League Soccer?
share. Yeah, I know some brands don't want to share that information because they don't want the renewal price tag to go like ridiculously high.
Yeah,
But I just know how important it is to have those case studies for everybody, right? And so I
yeah,
would share those results. And we did, we did some really, I felt really good work around the World Cup specifically, where we could say, you know what, we got 10,000 new requests from June to July, or accounts opening, around, and we could say like, well, if they ask for a Mexican national team card and we're promoting on the World Cup, like we can tie those new accounts to that, and so
yeah.
we would share those numbers, or at least I would share those numbers, with the property, because that was, that it's proof points for both of us, right?
Totally.
Internally, I go to we can go to our, marketing leaders and be like, this worked, right? And then
Yeah,
to MLS, we could also say like this worked too. And sometimes, I'm trying to think where things didn't work and they can go back and we can tweak, right? You can tweak what the contract said and say, hey, you know
yeah.
what, this didn't work. Can we try something new and different? Um, and that happened, although I'm trying to think of specific examples where maybe something didn't like really go the way any of us thought it would go. And so we said, let's just pivot
Yeah.
that way.
What were some of the tactics that did work really well? Like, was it those sweepstakes? Was it just making sure that we make sure this association is well known in every channel we have, or was it some content execution? Like, what were some of the tactics that you look
Yeah.
back on and be like, that crushed it?
At the time, like social media freaking changes every year, right? But this is anywhere between 2014, so 2014, 2018. We did really, like we did a lot of live, uh oh my gosh, what was it called? It's been so long ago. But so around this World Cup, we would do like live social moments, right? So we
Okay.
we, we literally set up, our social media team at Wells Fargo had a control room, and there was probably 9 screens that could monitor, whether it
Yeah.
was Twitter, Facebook. We had a game, we had the World Cup up while Mexico played, and we pre-programmed as much as possible, like pre-programmed creative, copy, and so as things happen during a match, like we were ready with a post or we were ready to then like supplement, like they just won, get your Wells Fargo, Mexico debit card
Yeah.
or whatever, and like do that in real time
That's
social media.
awesome.
And so that was like that social media piece was a really big win for us around the World Cup. Then we did, in both years, we did TV commercials. And we don't normally, you don't normally get the like supportive incremental budgets from, your marketing department to buy media, but around big games, you certainly did. And so
Yeah.
those 2 years, we were able to create TV campaigns that supported the Mexican national team and indirectly as well as Major League Soccer because we used Landon Donovan and that work. And that was, I will say, to this day, people still talk about some of the characters that we had in our TV spots. Um, for mostly better, some for worse. There was a campaign that Landon did for us that was, I felt really meaningful. We knew it was going to be controversial. And we had Landon, we're rooting for Mexico, and we're just like, are we going to be ready for, what might be a backlash, right? And
Right.
like, and Landon's always been very gracious about that. And has since, people ask him, even this year, like, hey, why'd you do it? Whatever. And he'll be open about like, hey, it wasn't just, yeah, sure. Part of it was an endorsement deal, but part of it was like, I really believed in what they were saying and what they were trying
Yeah.
to do. And so I would say TV campaign, social media, and anytime like, you can integrate the IP marks into a product, in this case, debit
Totally.
cards. Yeah, it was really, really good. And we had sweepstakes. And we definitely had meet and greets at our branches did really,
Yeah.
really well, especially in the Latino markets. Those are like our biggest levers, for
Totally.
sure. Yeah.
No, it makes sense. Getting more foot traffic, getting more, make
Yeah.
sure that association's out there. And now I'm just excited to watch all the activations around the World Cup and to be able to think like, yeah, how does this relate to what I learned about from Sarah? It just
Yeah.
really fun to watch. I also want to talk about like we mentioned a little bit of how it when you become a customer then of a sponsor you are understanding that in doing so they're supporting the thing that you care about and vice versa then and I want to take that into the context of women's sports in particular and where you live today with
Oh
women's
yeah.
athletes and women's sports in general and I think early on and maybe as you were coming up even the women's sports was seen almost as like a CSR play or like, look at us, we're helping, like, good for these, good for them, like we're helping them out, and it was like a community relations aspect until like eventually then Ally came along and some of the other early movers were like, No, this is just these are underpriced assets, and we're going to get a huge bang for our buck by investing in them. And yes, we want to see women get elevated to where they should be and get them better, better coverage and better TV windows and whatnot. But it became a business proposition more than a community relations proposition. So how did you kind of see that evolve from your purview, your perspective, and how do you see it play out today as well?
Oh my God, I've got so many different, I've got so many stories to say around this. So I'll try and narrow it down to two, maybe. I will say, like, kudos to Ally Bank, because they really made the mark. I will have to say, and I did mention this to Andrea Bremer, who's the CMO for Ally Bank. One of my colleagues at Wells Fargo, Andy Berlin, actually brought up that idea back in 2016,
Oh wow.
and it did. And our internal group really thought like, wow, that could be really good, really, really, yeah, really good, meaningful from a, reputational issues that we had to address. And that was one thing from I wouldn't say maybe, yeah, maybe a little bit of CSR, to start with, right? From a like, we want to support this, this community. And Andy's a big women's sports fan anyway. He's probably, bigger than me and may still be bigger than me, quite frankly. That was a really cool idea. It didn't take off, unfortunately. And I was like, damn, that would have been amazing. And so like fast forward, I think what, maybe 4 years after that, and Ally Bank became the darling of women's sports. But
Right.
so so turning from a CSR position to a business decision, I had looked at NWSL for sponsorship around 2019, because the Susie Petrowski, who now heads ESPNW, had reached out to me. She was at the league, and she's like, "Hey, have you thought about sponsoring a league?" I was like, "Oh, I'd like to learn more." And there was so many compelling reasons for sponsoring NWSL. For me, the number one reason was a digital footprint and an
Yeah.
engagement footprint. And I looked at this and I was like, wow, this could be a really cost-effective way to get social media engagement. As we know, like also at that time, like social media was becoming more and more popular and
Mhm.
important for brands. Ultimately, that was not approved because the teams at the time in the league um, didn't properly overlap the Wells Fargo footprint, right? So if Wells Fargo was in these locations, NWSL teams were in those locations, and some
Yeah.
overlapped and some didn't. But to have half the league not overlap did not make sense, you know.
Right. Right.
But I still try to push the digital narrative, like, hey, I know we're not in Kansas City, and I know we're not in Chicago at the time, and I know we're not in these places, but the fan base is everywhere,
Yeah.
like, and really concentrated in Wells Fargo, and that didn't fly, unfortunately. And so that really opened my eyes, was really the social media footprint and digital and the consumer and fan engagement footprint, um, digitally. And so that was it. That was a turning point for me. So if I've got that NWSL like um, insight around their digital footprint, I'm now working with, I had been working with TMJ, who, while they had the relationships with the Mexican national team on the men's side, really started saying, can we put more women's program, like women players into your programs and your initiatives? They're like, oh, sure, like we'll sprinkle them in, like let's do that, right? And you saw the engagement rates. So that was like another validating point
Yeah.
on the Mexican women's soccer side. And again, going from, seeing what TMJ had 20 players to offer to then 150 players, like that's huge. Like there's there's a market. And then, that's now, let me fast forward to 2020, COVID hits, and the first two live sports in the US that comes back is WNBA and NWSL, right? And so
Yeah.
that, I think, to me, that was a big inflection point for the industry in the US. And wherever the US goes, the rest of the world typically follows. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's
just the growth of TikTok and athlete social becoming more and more a bigger thing, and these I feel like these women athletes, like they had to be really active on social early on because they had to market their teams and their leagues
yes,
more than the male athletes who were buttressed by these legacy brands that had been around for decades and how the
you're so
gatekeepers
right.
helping for them. And so like what's I think we hear these narratives too, and there's some data backing up oftentimes as well where fans, women athletes, their fans trust them more when they endorse a brand, or their engagement rate is higher on average, or
Yeah.
they're better. It's like how much of these of this narrative is part of the TMJ story when you guys are talking to brands and working with athletes, and what are you seeing actually play out in the marketplace? Like, do you see does this narrative come true when it comes to the data, and what's sort of like the is it a contrast between this is why it's better to invest in a women's athlete versus a male athlete, or is that not really how it's portrayed?
Yeah. No, I think it's definitely one of our kind of for folks who aren't familiar with the women's sports space, that's definitely you got to throw the data, right? Where it's like, oh, I want to be data-based, data-based, decision making, blah, blah, blah. So you have to throw that in there, and the numbers are like super compelling. Again, my memory's trash, but it'll be, whatever the baseline is, women's sports is, well above that. I don't know, 80%, in terms of like brand, become consumers of those brands that support the club. Like I've seen that Courage, I've seen that, even on the men's side, like you've got your sponsorship effect, and then you add, the women's layer, and like they're even more loyal
Yeah.
to those brands that invest in the teams that they love. So yeah, that's I think with the women, it's I think aside from the data, we can also say, look, it's not as saturated as the men's sports. So you're going to have a lot more um, uh, awareness, right? You're going to have a lot more white space to play in. You're going to have a lot more, we talked about the brand loyalty. You're going to have a lot more of that. And then we also don't have to, you don't have to do and I think you brought this up in previous things. Like, you've got new categories you can play with. You can
Totally.
try new things, and it becomes even more of a white space because you're not competing against, brands that are typically in this landscape. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's a big piece. And I will say the last piece is, which I haven't, maybe it's implied or maybe people understand, but because women's sports have grown so fast over the last 5 years, from an investor, like a literal financial investor standpoint, not just a marketer's, investment, people follow wherever the money goes, right? And you're seeing big money get into women's sports, and you're seeing, billionaires buying into and whatever, and for whatever reason, people think billionaires are like smartest, folks in the room. I don't think it's always the case, but when it comes to women's sports, yes, yeah, I'll give them that credit,
Yeah, yeah.
And so
When Arthur Blank buys a team for $165 million, you open your eyes.
yeah, right. And so everybody else, and so that, that news is now on CNBC, and marketers are watching CNBC, right? So you've got, like an even, exponential, input
Yeah.
that's coming into to the space, and it's really important, right? So again, where the money goes, especially big money names, you're going to have the media following, and you're going to have the marketers follow too.
Yeah, it's
So
like a self-fulfilling prophecy almost. Like if we think it's true, then as people believe it's true, then they start acting on it, and it becomes
yeah,
true, whether it was
yeah.
that big to begin with. And so it's cool to see that play
In
out.
this
And
case, it is, right? Like, and
yeah,
so, and it's wild, not even 3 years ago, the metric was, this was a metric I think I did know, which is like all sports on TV, at least in the US, was only women's sports, only 4% was focused on
yeah,
women's
I
sports,
remember that.
right? And now I've heard the most recent number is 15% now
Yeah,
on, like being televised. And I'm like, that's huge. That's
totally.
a like massive growth. But still, it's only 15%. So it can only go higher, right?
Heck yeah.
Maybe
Do
not
you find
100%. That's impossible, right? Because you got to share.
we'll
But I
let
should say
we'll let
more.
the men can still have half at least. So we'll split it half and half. So
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So it's been really fun, and I feel like super lucky to have, like, come in at the right time. But if I was Andy, and my coworker, my colleague and friend, who said like we should be investing in women's sports, back in 2016, like, I would have come in even earlier, right?
totally. Well, I mean, and I want to post it in a question as well, where like these female athletes, because they and still today don't make it nearly as much in salary from their teams as the men do. And the WNBA story is obviously a big one with with Caitlin Clark. I make more than her in my annual salary probably, but she completely destroys me when it comes to her total take home pay from all her endorsements and stuff. And so I say that to say like these female athletes who had to be good about building their brands and working with folks like TMJ to get those brand deals because frankly they need the money to survive. And so as you've seen that play out, like do you find that these athletes are more content savvy, social savvy, more brand savvy, understand the need and the opportunity and the value they can produce by being more active. Like I felt like early on, even when I was coming up in my career, where you almost had to early on like convince the male athletes like, hey, you should build your brand. Like you can get deals, and they're probably thinking like, I mean, I get $200,000 a week for my contract. Who do I need that
Right.
for? So I mean, did you see that like not even a factor for on the women's side where they are coming in already kind of knowing that this is their opportunity to really make bank?
You know what? That's you. It's not as that thought process or that mindset is not as prevalent as I thought it was, which is really
Mhm.
interesting. And I'm wondering if it's specific to women's soccer. And what I'm saying, and the reason why I'm saying this is because while younger folks are definitely on social media, like they are so focused on being the best athlete possible
Yeah.
that anything else is a distraction, right? And so I'm thinking, okay, like, and there's some folks who definitely understand that, like, I can make, I'm a decent player. I may not be the best player. I'm going to, make sure I work on my personal brand and my reputation, and kind of build um my income that way. But for the most part, I was actually trying to think about it recently. Like, why is that? Like, why aren't there more players like really focused on it? And I'm thinking, there might be this other layer of, it's not just going pro, but is there this other layer? I was like, I have to be the best so I can make a national team, right? Because you
Yeah.
don't see that as much in other sports besides soccer, I don't think. But like, feel free to challenge me. And I'm
No,
just thinking,
totally.
it's like another layer of like, yes, I made it to the pros, but I still have to be even better than everybody to not just win a championship, but that I can represent my country, on the global stage. And so
Yeah.
I really think that that focus has, and it's a focus, it's an important focus, has maybe, kind of deterred them from maybe doing more
Yeah.
commercially or more socially to be able to open up those doors. So
That's interesting. It's a fascinating chip on the shoulder when it's not good enough to be one of the best 150 players in the world in the country. You have to be one of the best 15 players in the country.
yes, right, exactly. And that's like they're hungry for that. And so I understand it. To me, I thought, oh, it's gonna be easy. I'm gonna like do more social. Let's do more. And it's not that easy. Because they don't want to lose sight of the bigger goal, which is like, I want to win a World Cup trophy. I want to be on a national team. I want to win a World
Yeah.
Cup trophy,
So
which is
how
like the
does that color
ultimate.
your conversation? A couple minutes left here with Sara Toussaint. She's the co-CEO of TMJ and head of TMJ Catalyst. We're almost getting down to the wire here before we get to the simple shareable stat. But how do those conversations play out then with the women that TMJ works with, that you work with as well? Of like, yes, I understand that we want you to be the best elite player you can, but I also want to make sure that I can help you, create generational wealth and to change your life and to change your family's life. Like, do you have to have those kind of those real life conversations of like there's a balance here and my job is to make you successful, and yes, it doesn't mean you're going to be doing like deals every minute of every day. Like I want to make sure you have time for your training. Like it's a
Yeah.
tough balance, I'm sure. What are those conversations like?
It is. And I don't push too. I'll let the agent do that. Their respective agents
Yeah,
do that.
right,
But
right.
for the most part, I at least want to give them the opportunity and say, hey, no, this is here for you if you want it. And what I do try and share is what I've heard what I've heard retired players tell me, and share that story. So it's not just me like kind of being like
Yeah,
the nag, right? And like the second mom they probably don't need, but I'll say, oh, you know what? I was talking to this retired player who's actually doing well in their post, playing career. Something that I've heard regularly was, gosh, I really wish I did more media interviews, or I really wish I had worked on my social. Luckily it's worked out for them, but they go back and they think, oh, had I done this while I was playing, where could I be even? Would I be even further along in my second career?
yeah.
So I'll share those anecdotes versus the, hey, I think this is best, this is like better for you, and just hope that kind of resonates a little bit more than me, nobody really listens to advice that's given to them. Some do, but in the moment when they're like, I'm just so focused. But if they do have somebody I know they respect, and this particular story I'm thinking about was a U.S. national team player, who did retire and did find another, career in the media space, and just letting him know, like, that was a conversation I had with this player that was in
Yeah.
your shoes, and that's something I wish. So I'll do it from an anecdote perspective versus
Yeah. Well, I imagine some of the deals that you guys can put together can also appeal to other like desires and wants as well. Like this is going to help send a great message to other women who other girls who want to grow up and
yeah.
be like you. And you're going to be able like we're not just going to hook you up with a brand like this, but this brand wants to further a cause that's important to you or deliver a message that's
Yeah.
really powerful. And so I think there's a lot to that as well.
Yeah, no, yeah, for sure, for sure. But then I just have to stop and be like, and also like I am, at this point I could be probably some of these folks' mothers, right? And so like when you're starting out, you just want to be the best player you possibly can be
Right.
and then maybe relax and not think about work, right? Afterwards. When for some folks, for some people, social media is work. And so
Totally.
I'm just like, all right. Well, I always say like we're here, when you're ready. But at the very least, I'll, share opportunities. If you want to do it, great. If not, that's okay too.
Yeah. One last thing, just we'll share stat, and then our rapid fire set play segment, and that is with the World Cup coming very soon, the men's World Cup, of course. Like, how do you what is that? What do you like, everyone keeps saying this is going to mean a lot for soccer in the U.S. and we're going to come out and the pre-World Cup era is going to look different from the post-World Cup in the U.S. era. So like, what does that? What do you anticipate that to mean? Like, and what's going to make the difference between like it having the impact and hope and that we anticipate and hope that it will versus not. Like we always talk about like it's just going to happen automatically, but what actually has to happen and to play out so that we have it's not just a blip over the course of 3 weeks or a month or whatever, and that a year from now we're still
Yeah.
talking about that this is the new era of soccer in the U.S.
No, I mean, it's such a great question. I don't think I think a lot of us we talk about that moment, and I feel like sometimes we probably are taking it for granted. Like it's gonna happen, right? Um, I I feel like maybe we're coming at that approach from like really a social media, pre-streaming with all these options perspective. Maybe I'm wrong. But I don't think anybody can take the opportunity of the World Cup for granted without doing some of that legwork. And like, what does that legwork mean? It's like just keep, and I think the responsibility is like on anybody who's really in the soccer space, it's continue to beat that drum and say, hey, it's not just about 2026. Like that's part of it, but we also have 2027. We also have the Olympics. We also
Yeah.
have the next one. Like, and just say like, if you're gonna have fun this summer, it's gonna keep going. And we've got, beach, and it's really, I guess, most also meaningful for us and should be because it's in the U.S., right? So if like we can make sure we not only hype it up and make sure, and I mean, I don't know if this is up to us, but like, do people get into the stadiums,
Right.
right? Whether from an affordability standpoint or access standpoint or whatever, and not have it, not have that turn into the negative experience where people are like, I don't want to deal with this again. That was like a mess, right? And
Yeah.
so I think, and I'm hoping, and I think we are seeing, movements from FIFA like revisiting their pricing and coming out and saying, all right, like what can we do? And it's got to be up to the MLS. It's gonna be up to sorry the NWSL, MLS, US Soccer, everybody even Liga MX and the Canadian leagues
Yeah.
to make sure like this is going to be a fun experience for everybody and that goes to you know like how are all these entities going to take advantage of it leading up to the World Cup, during the regular season games and then post World Cup and keep that momentum going and it's really I don't have all the answers, but there's so many variables at play. It's like we just cannot lose, I don't think any club in the US should take it for granted the World Cup's going to happen in the US. I think they have to like find ways to tie into it and then afterwards find ways to tie
Yeah.
it and just keep that conversation going.
Totally, and almost to bring it back full circle, before we just little show that, like that's where some of the sponsors can come into play and help put on events
Yes,
and
yes.
have opportunities to activate and bring fans. Like even if you're not in a World Cup city or if you can't go to a game, come to we're gonna do a fan fest, we're gonna do a watch party, we're gonna have a bunch of activations, and so there's opportunity to really
There's
pour
so
that momentum
much.
on.
Yeah, I mean, Wells Fargo, we didn't have in 2018, we didn't have the rights to the World Cup. We leveraged the rights that we did have, and we built a campaign that caused, some commotion around Landon rooting for, captain of
Right.
the US team, rooting for Mexico, that Wells Fargo was the third most talked about brand after Nike and Adidas. Like, and who would have thought? Like, we don't, like it's a bank.
That's amazing.
We don't have their budgets. We're not, like we're not a known sports entity. And so I think anybody who who doesn't participate in some way, shape, or form, even if you're not in soccer, is probably missing out. So what would be really
Yeah,
cool is if we do see some NFL teams taking advantage of it, WNBA, NBA,
yeah,
MLB, like if they're smart, they will. I don't know what they're gonna do though.
yeah.
I
Well,
haven't heard any rumblings about that.
hopefully there's a U.S. run to the late stages so we can have some momentum around that as well. But just so
I
much good
hope
stuff,
so.
Sarah. And we're gonna have some more fun with you in our set play segment. First episode, shareable stat coming up right now. Just tremendous stuff with Sarah. Just so much good energy and enthusiasm and insight and knowledge. Just a wealth of experience and really learned a lot from her. But stick around because we're going to have some more fun with her and you'll hear some more from Sarah in our set plays segment. But first, this episode's shareable stat. This episode's shareable stat is an interesting one. We talked in a recent episode with Alyssa Myers from Marketing Brew about mascots. We talked specifically about Ellie the elephant and her great work with the New York Liberty and how she has brand deals with SE among others. And so this episode of Sat looks at mascots. And that is I believe this is the highest paid mascot, or at least according to a study that was recently published or recently put in the Axios Philadelphia publication. But that is $625,000. That is the annual salary for the Denver Nuggets mascot, Rocky the Mountain Lion. According to their analysis, he makes $625,000, he or she, whoever you want to gender the mascot, and that's followed closely behind by the Atlanta Hawks. Harry the Hawk makes $600,000, and Benny the Bull, the Chicago Bulls, great mascot, $400,000. And they also noted that the Flyers mascot, Gritty, Philadelphia Flyers of the NHL, makes $250,000 a year, approximately, which is nearly as much as the Pennsylvania governor, Josh Shapiro. Thanks to Sports Business Journal for finding this study that was put together again by Axios Philadelphia, and the study collected a lot of data from reputable sources, so you can pretty much trust this. So again, $625,000. So what do you take away from this? Mascots, they work hard, they are well paid for that hard work, and they represent the organization, the team in so many different ways. They're certainly making appearances all the time, well beyond the games. You may not see them all everywhere they go, but they're going to schools and hospitals and even children's parties and corporate events and everything under the sun with the team and beyond the team as well. And certainly you see them at so many games and events representing the team. And we're also starting to see a lot more strategy put into how you utilize these mascots, particularly, especially on social media, where mascots have their own accounts, of course. And, whether it's the team social media manager or director who is running it, or someone who's dedicated to it, or the mascots themselves, the people behind them like to, take a role as well in managing the strategy and the content. And we've seen great success over the years. Certainly Benny the Bull was a major player and it still is on TikTok. I mentioned in a previous podcast, Cosmo, the BYU Cougar, is a great presence on TikTok as well. And that's just one of many. Ellie the Elephant, as I alluded to with Alyssa, is a great presence for not just New York Liberty, but the WBA, women's sports in general, with what she's doing for mascots. And certainly I will genderize Ellie the Elephant because she is a feminine mascot and works with brands in that range, certainly. So what does this mean overall? Yes, we can put more strategy behind how do we actually work with mascots to really turn them into not just a marketing expense, but as we talked about with Lewis Wiltshire, and about social media and digital strategy in general, not just a marketing expense, but a true revenue generator. How can we expect mascots to generate revenue? Because when they're making that high salaries, they should be generating revenue. So certainly that means having a thoughtful content strategy, working with your partnership teams, just like you do working on sponsor content for your mainstream channels, for your team channels and whatnot. How can you develop sponsorable franchises? How can you do, content that's whether it's behind the scenes or repeatable or step and repeat or whatever it might be, things that can be set up to make sure that they are amenable to potential brand activations and corporate partnerships. And then, be able to track the analytics and the metrics so you can put something in front of the sponsorship sales team, partnership marketing team that they can put in front of a potential partner. And whether it's bundling with the team or doing something standalone for the mascot, your mascot is available, not 24/7 necessarily, but certainly all year round while players are going off in the off seasons. A mascot can still be viable in the off season, and you can create. We're starting to see, of course, lots of micro dramas and fun little shows and things that go well beyond sports and behind the scenes as well. So start to really think about and brainstorm how can we turn our mascot into a revenue generator, especially when it comes to the content strategy and these digital and social channels, which can go well beyond game day. So that's just a shareable stat. Super interesting. Again, that shareable stat is the Denver Nuggets Rocky the Mountain Lion makes $625,000 a year in salary, according to this article on Axios Philadelphia. Super interesting. Think about it, talk about it, ponder it. But more importantly, stick around for some great quick hitting questions in our set play segment with Sara Toussaint of TMJ and TMJ Catalyst. Right back to Central Shareable Stat, and I'm joined once again by Sara Toussaint. She is the co-CEO of TMJ and head of TMJ Catalyst. Sara, you crushed it in the interview segment. Are you now ready to run some set plays?
Let's go. Let's do it.
Let's see if you can, bend some in and set up some headers and some goals and all that. I love it. I love my puns. All right, number one, the first soccer match you remember attending, and if it's assuming it's different, the most memorable soccer match you've ever been at.
Ooh, first soccer match. It was actually seeing my cousin play in a youth soccer tournament. But my first professional match was DC United versus Chicago Fire in DC in 2001.
Oh, I love it. All right,
Memorable.
number two for you. This is an interesting one I want to hear about. Tell me, what have you learned about Liga MX? And do you think like is the future going to be a merger with MLS?
Ooh, Liam Yankees. I've been around Mexican soccer, I feel, for like most of my sporting career. It's such a important property in Mexico for sure, but it's a very important property here in the US. A lot of their stats, media ratings outperform a lot of US
Yeah.
ratings in sports. What have I learned? Mismanaged, but lots of potential. I actually became an investor in a Liga MX team. I forgot to bring that up.
Oh wow.
Querétaro, Los Gallos Blancos. I don't think it will merge with MLS. I think there's too much of an identity in these clubs in Mexico to consider. But maybe I'm wrong, but
Yeah.
I don't think it'll merge. But I could be totally wrong.
Yeah, and for anyone who's not familiar, like the ratings that they get, the viewership they get on like Televisión or Univision and Telemundo are phenomenal. So it's definitely an interesting area to watch.
Regular season games, yeah, totally outpace a lot of
Yeah, it
US
crushes it.
sports. Hmm.
Next one for you, Sara. Tell me the athlete who's not working with TMJ, who you think whether it's a campaign or just their overall presence, who you think is it does a good job with their overall brand and why?
Ooh, ugh. It's not gonna be doing soccer.
Okay.
I'm intrigued by Lewis Hamilton, the Formula One race car driver.
Yeah.
I just think he's so charming. I don't know why I thought um well, maybe not a few years old, but he's in his 40s. I didn't realize that. I thought he was in his 20s. And so I'm like, what is it about him that gives off this like very youthful like energy, yet, he's got a ton of like really like great brands, luxury brands that see him as like a very serious person, which he is,
Yeah.
but I love everything about him. I think just how he carries himself, what he believes in. He stands true to what he's doing, and I don't think I don't think it's been at the expense of any of his professional or commercial deals.
Totally. Yeah. He feels like luxury, but also approachable. And he's not like Cristiano Ronaldo, like removed or distant or something.
Such a great analysis, Neil. I yes, that.
Oh, that's a great one. Next one for you, Sara. This will be a fun one. Tell me your favorite recent or all-time brand partnership with a TMJ athlete.
Oh my goodness. I would say maybe not specific athlete. I'm gonna say we
Okay.
did a deal recently with this brand called Nopalera. It's a Latina founded luxury brand, but accessible, right? In the perfume space, skincare space. And they partnered with us because they saw the portfolio we represented as like being like a personification of who they are, just like bold, very proud of their roots, and like ripe for growth. So,
Awesome.
nopalera.
Oh, I like that. We'll just check that out and keep up on it.
Yes.
Next one for you. So this will be a good one here. Tell me the biggest factor behind the growth of NWSL the past couple of years and the leverage you think will be most important to make sure it continues to grow and have success going forward.
Okay. I for sure media is always I feel like the number one driver, but I really close second is just literally the investors coming into the space to see NWSL clubs as as part of their investment portfolio. It's an asset class, right, at this point. And so I
Yeah.
would say investors are a big piece of it.
Yeah, getting the right owners in place and making sure that they are ready to invest because that's how you can continue to see that growth happen for sure. All right, it's time for our food question. Let's ask our food question. I'm excited for this one. You live in you've been part of a great food city out in the great Chicago area. Tell me the best meal to get in Chicago and where do we get it?
All right, I'm gonna say it's a coffee shop with really great breakfast options, and it's called
Ooh.
Stockyard. It's only, I don't know, maybe 2 blocks away from where Chicago White Sox play, which I want to say Comiskey Park, but that's not what it's called anymore.
Yeah, U.S.
Um,
Cellular, I think.
yeah, no, it's changed. Even that,
Oh,
it's like changed so many times. But just know it's within walking distance of where the White Sox play. But it's Stockyard Coffee House. It is also Latino. And I'm not just touting Latino and brands, but it's you can go there. It doesn't matter who you are. You will feel absolutely welcomed. It's like you can see literally every type of person you can imagine like expect that's there. They have like horchata coffees, lattes, just everything is like themed and they really bring their Mexican roots to it. But I don't drink coffee. I'll drink their coffee. It's delicious. And you can get some really great breakfast sandwiches there.
ooh, all
It's
right. I
total
like
creative
it.
spot. It's oh, it's so good. It's so good. And the
That
owners
sounds
are
good.
incredible.
It sounds good to me. I like it. No, and that last one, or no, almost last one. We got second to last one. We took a couple more here with Sarah Toussaint of TMJ and TMJ Catalyst. Tell me the sport besides basketball and soccer with the biggest upside for women's athletes or women's sports from your peer view.
Flag football. It's
Oh.
I it's wild. And I know people are talking about, volleyball too, but like flag football really and then they just announced NFL just announced like every one of their teams is gonna
Yeah.
give me $1 million. But even before that announcement, it just seems like it's been really hot. I've been seeing people young women play just in the parks around here, in the schools around here. So I'm just like, I think there's gonna be something there.
Yeah, I mean, interesting to see like who is that breakout star athlete perhaps that can get on the radar, or maybe it'll happen after the Olympics in 28, and that's gonna be a big stepping stone forward as well. But yeah, I mean, the participation is growing, and so it seems inevitable.
And it's so flashy to watch too. Like you can make some really, cool moves and highlight reels and clips from it. So yeah.
Heck yeah, I like it. All right, last one here for you, Sarah. Tell me the athlete we should all go stop right now and go check out and follow their social.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. It's gotta be all the TMJ athletes.
All of them, every single one. List
It's
off
gotta be every
all
single
150
one.
plus.
I know. Oh, that's so hard.
All right, you can just pick a TMJ athlete who you think is just really stepped up their game recently or something, or really does something really cool.
Oh
I,
God,
I,
I
I
should
hate
have.
to make you pick favorites, but just
I'm.
someone who's recently caught your eye, I guess.
Oh my gosh, I am. Oh, you know what? I'm gonna say Haley Hopkins. You know why? Haley Hopkins is, I think, in her third year in the NWSL. She's president of the NWSL PA. She is a delight. She's hilarious. She played for the Courage. She's not with us anymore, but great leadership skills. I think she's funny too. But she really, I don't think she really loves social media though. But I think more people need to follow Haley Hopkins.
There we go. Check her
They're
out. She's out there
so,
somewhere.
they're
And now I'm
so
going to make you shout out one more, not an athlete or cameo athlete if you want, but just this is your social all-star to follow. It can be a social follow. It can be a newsletter. It can be a podcast. Just tell us, give us a recommendation on something that we should all go check out and follow.
Oh my gosh. Social media all-star besides yourself, I would
Certainly.
say, um, oh my gosh. I am liking there's a woman, Caroline Fitzgerald on LinkedIn, really talking about women's sports space and business, and the
Yeah,
results and the ROI there. Yeah, that's gonna be my recommendation.
I like it. I feel like she's come across my feed before. And then how about you, Sarah? Where can we find you as well as all things TMJ, TMJ Catalyst across digital, social, non-social, whatever, everything.
Wait, say it one more time.
Where can we find you? Where can we find you as
Oh,
well
I'm
as all
sorry.
things? This is your chance to shout yourself as well as TMJ and TMJ Catalyst. Where can we find you all?
Oh, I would say, you know what? I love link. I'm on LinkedIn every day. So yeah, just search me on LinkedIn is probably a good one. I am on Instagram. But yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best option.
I like it. And how about TMJ, TMJ Catalyst?
Oh, of course, yes, yeah. I think it's TMJ underscore Catalyst on Instagram, and then TMJWF on Instagram. I am so bad at like I should be better about self promotion there, but yes, please follow. More news
It's
to come.
all good. You did more than enough. You give me such great insight and knowledge and energy today. I could really appreciate you coming on the podcast, and it's been great to be able to catch up with you in general.
You too, Nia. I'm so excited for like everything you've been building. It's very cool to watch you continue to grow.
I appreciate it. Just tremendous stuff with Sara Toussaint. I could really speak with her all day. She just brings such great energy and so much good insight into the space, and you can tell that she thinks about the stuff and is knowledgeable about it. And just really appreciate Sara, not just over the years, but certainly for what she gave us on the podcast today, giving us some of her time and expertise. But that'll do for this episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. Thanks again for listening or watching. As always, I'm your host, Neil Horowitz. Hit me up on Twitter, NGH287, on LinkedIn. I would love to connect with you there. The website is dsmsports.net. And of course, this podcast is available on whichever podcast platform is your favorite. Until next time, this is Neil Horowitz signing off for the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast.